I knew he'd never read a single damn line of what I filed. I knew at the moment his smug, pre-chosen words for my exit started echoing through the auditorium mic like a Best Buy manager announcing a flat-screen sale. But before we get to that moment, before the applause and the plaque and the investor's mic went live, let me take you back to how I became a ghost inside a company I built from the server cables up. It used to call me Ops Mom behind my back, not in a sweet way. In that condescending, passive-aggressive way that says, she's dependable, but let's not invite her to the innovation meetings. I didn't care. Let them mock my post-it walls and quiet desk lunches. While the flashier ones were chasing LinkedIn clout and overpriced leadership retreats, I was closing audit loops, mapping SEC compliance, and wrangling vendor contracts like a rodeo clown with a clipboard. Nobody likes the woman who says that's not in the renewal cycle yet, but they need her. And for 11 years, I was that woman. My name's Virginia Boone, and I made a Laris Partners run. Not in a sexy way. The lights didn't flicker because I filed the Form 10K on time way. I kept the doors open, the contracts current, the vendors paid, and the intellectual property untouched. My job was to quietly patch the holes before anyone fell in. Then Jeremy Cavanaugh arrived. The board called him a shot of adrenaline. To me, he looked like a used Tesla salesman who drank his own supply. Slick hair, big jaw, always holding a branded water bottle like it gave him credibility. Within 2 weeks, he'd installed his own culture committee and started tossing around phrases like generational reinvention and legacy load balancing. Translation: if you're over 40 and not on TikTok, you're next on the chopping block. I became invisible overnight. 1 week I was being CC'd on every compliance update. The next, I was getting invites to optional visioning sessions led by a former Soul Cycle coach in shoulder pads. When I tried to ask if we'd filed our Q2 investor update, Jeremy laughed and said, "Virginia, let's not anchor ourselves to past definitions of value. Anchor this, Jeremy." Oh, and quick sidebar. If you're already hooked into this train wreck and you're one of the 90% listening without hitting that subscribe button, come on, hit like, smash subscribe, or whatever the kids say. It helps more than you know. We've got receipts, red flags, and one hell of a mic drop coming your way. Anyway, back to the slow motion betrayal. Jeremy didn't fire me right away. No, that would have required spine. He started with the gentle erosion, stripping me of high-impact projects, reassigning junior staff without telling me, blocking my access to our contract repository with a one-line Slack message. Let's pivot your role toward legacy knowledge curation. Whatever the hell that meant. Then came the Q3 transition plan. Translation: HR summoned me for a meeting with a laminated folder and the warmth of a DMV clerk. I used words like celebrating your contributions and helping you find the next chapter. The folder had an exit date, a severance package, and a list of talking points in case I wanted to co-create the goodbye narrative. As if the woman who kept their SEC filings compliant needed help writing a damn email. I didn't argue, didn't blink, didn't say a word, really. Because Jeremy wasn't the first man to mistake silence for weakness. I'd seen this play before at my last firm, in fact. A quiet woman pushed out without notice, replaced by a CFO's nephew and forgotten by quarter's end. But she'd whispered something in the elevator once, months before it all went down. "File your own clause," she'd said. "Buried is still binding." So 6 months before Jeremy's little culture refresh, I walked into our legal archive and did just that. Clause 8.2b, Retention Custodian. 1 page, quietly submitted under a resolution update while everyone was busy planning the company retreat to Scottsdale. It didn't look like much. Just a line about my role, my responsibilities, and a trigger condition that only fired if I was removed without board ratification and 90-day notice. A bureaucratic backstop, buried in a sea of digital paperwork. But if activated, it paused everything. Funding, hiring, expansion. It turned the lights red, and only one name could activate it. Mine. So while Jeremy drafted his performative little exit ceremony, complete with a plaque and a 5-minute slide montage set to royalty-free Coldplay, I was already prepping one piece of paper. 1 page, 1 clause, 1 signature, because I wasn't leaving quietly. I was just waiting for the mic. They started with Alan in finance. One Monday morning, his badge didn't work. 45 years old, 2 kids, still kept every receipt in a manila folder and could balance vendor payments in his sleep. Gone. No warning, no thank you bagel. Just a boxed-up monitor at reception with his name scrawled in Sharpie. Then it was Patris from contracts. Then Lydia from ops. Then the guy who knew how to fix the VPN without yelling at it. Jeremy called it optimization. Said it in meetings like he was announcing a holiday bonus. We're refreshing the org structure to align with modern growth velocity. If you were over 38 and had been there longer than his haircut, you were suddenly legacy overhead. The interns called it the cleanse. And I knew I was next. Not because anyone told me directly, no. That would have been too honest. I knew because Jeremy started introducing people I didn't recognize as new transformation specialists and inviting them to meetings I used to lead. One afternoon, I walked past a glass conference room and saw my own role, Director of Operational Continuity, on a PowerPoint slide under the heading functions to reevaluate. 2 seats away, a 20-something with a ring light in her purse was nodding like she'd just discovered fire. Jeremy caught my eye through the glass, gave me a little thumbs up. The kind you give a dog for almost sitting. By the time HR called me in, I'd already boxed up half my desk in my head. They put me in room B, the one with the fake fern and the sound machine playing Ocean Breeze. I sat across from an HR generalist who looked like she'd practiced this meeting in front of a mirror. Her tone was all we value you, and let's talk about your next chapter. But her eyes were trying not to look directly at the severance packet. It was 5 pages. Generic. Didn't mention a single one of the 63 vendor integrations I'd overseen. Didn't reference the policy overhaul I led after the 2020 audit. No line item for the 3-day weekend. I gave up to handhold a German compliance officer through our security protocol so he wouldn't pull the plug on a $12M renewal. Just thank you for your years of service. And then, please return your badge by COB on your final day. The same HR person who once asked me to mediate a spat between her and her roommate over Slack emojis didn't even ask if I had questions. I asked one anyway. Was this reviewed by legal? She blinked. Standard procedure. That's not what I asked. She cleared her throat. The package was prepared in alignment with company offboarding protocols. Translation, no one read my actual contract. No one pulled the clause, no one bothered. And that, God help me, that almost made me laugh. Jeremy had cornered me in the hallway 2 days earlier. He had that fake friendly energy, like a man who's about to repossess your car but still wants you to like him. We're putting together something special for your farewell, he said like he was planning a damn baby shower. You've been a cornerstone, Virginia. Truly. You want to honor that? I nodded, said thank you. Mentally filed it under performative nonsense. He wasn't interested in honoring me. He was interested in scripting my departure. He wanted me on stage, smiling and subdued, holding some dumb acrylic award while he rattled off a list of buzzwords and waited for applause. He wanted tears. That's what all men like him want. One last emotional flare from the woman they underestimated. One last sign that their actions mattered. But I wasn't giving him that. I didn't cry. Not when they handed me the packet. Not when they accidentally cut off my access to the finance server a week early. Not even when I watched my own job description reposted online under a new title with digital native mindset preferred in the qualifications. I didn't cry because I'd already grieved. Months ago. The day I wrote the clause and filed it, I let go of any illusion that they saw me, that they'd protect me. That merit had anything to do with survival in a company run by people who think Slack channels are culture and font choice is strategy. I wasn't staying, but I also wasn't leaving on their terms. Every move from here on out was a setup. Not for some dramatic showdown. No, I didn't need to shout. I just needed to last until the next all hands. Sit through the slow suffocation. Nod through the meetings I was ghosted in. Pack up my desk in silence. And wait, because that clause didn't need my voice, just my name. The archive room was freezing, like someone told the HVAC unit to punish old documents for aging. Half the bulbs were burnt out, casting everything in that sickly, flickering light that made even legal printouts look haunted. You wouldn't know from the outside that it was the single most powerful room in the entire building. Most people at Alaris had forgotten it existed. Jeremy, for all his PowerPoint swagger and WeWork vocabulary, probably thought record storage meant a Dropbox folder someone forgot to share. But I knew. Tucked in the far-right cabinet, under board resolutions signed originals, was a burgundy binder that still smelled like toner and legal panic. I didn't need a label, I remembered the weight of it. Had practically memorized the tab layout. I pulled it out, flipped past the CEO travel indemnity forms and the 2021 bonus structure rewrites and found the page. Exactly where I'd filed it, quietly. 6 months ago, it was plain. 1 page, boring fonts, no watermark, no drama. But to the right eyes, it was nuclear. The heading read, Amendment to Resolution 14, Investor Continuity Oversight Clause 8.2b. I reread the language slowly, like I was tasting it, just to feel it again. Every word had been chosen for clarity, not flair. The kind of language that says, don't mess with me in pure legal. It granted a single, obscure role retention custodian authority to ensure investor continuity during executive restructuring periods. In plain terms, if someone tried to remove that person without 90 days' notice and a recorded board vote, the clause triggered a compliance freeze. It wasn't illegal, wasn't even adversarial, it was just a lock, and I was the key. The signature at the bottom, right above the notary stamp, was mine. It had been countersigned by legal during a week when our firm's general counsel was out sick, and a temp associate was greenlighting resolution updates like a PEZ dispenser. Funny how no one noticed, funnier how no one cared. I didn't add it out of spite, not at first. I added it after watching a woman named Sarah Nguyen get iced out. Sarah had been with Alaris for 9 years. She ran compliance. Brilliant, sharp, methodical, could quote audit policy like scripture. But one day, Jeremy decided she wasn't a culture fit. That's all it took. A few Slack messages, a surprise performance review, and a final day cupcake tray with no card. She left with dignity. But I remember how she looked at me in the parking lot, said nothing, just nodded, like she knew her silence was an inheritance I'd need later. That's the day I wrote Clause 8.2b. It wasn't just a clause, it was a line in the sand. Invisible, uncelebrated, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic indifference, but sharp enough to cut when needed. I kept it quiet. Didn't tell a soul. Not even Marissa in finance. Used to bring me leftover birthday cake from her kids' parties, and once covered for me during a 13-hour vendor call. I didn't tell her because protection, once known, becomes permission. And this clause wasn't for others, it was mine. I stared at the paper now in that fluorescent half-dark and felt nothing like triumph. What I felt was inevitability. Jeremy thought he was building a new company culture. But what he was really building was a trap for himself. Every speech, every reassignment, every fake smile he tossed my way only added weight to the lever I was quietly preparing. That clause didn't care if I cried. It didn't care if I got applause. It didn't even care if I showed up to work in a hoodie with outdated written across the front. All it needed was one condition: unapproved removal of the retention custodian. And that's what HR handed me on a silver platter. The clause wasn't emotional. I was. But I tucked that deep down, let it fossilize. There'd be time to feel things later. I slid the binder back into place, smoothed the edges, and walked out like nothing had happened. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing off a tiny graveyard of forgotten power. Except one page. Mine. Jeremy didn't know it yet, but he'd already lost. The fuse had been lit. The trigger loaded. Now all I had to do was wait for him to pull it. The printer in the compliance wing was ancient. You had to feed it one sheet at a time and speak to it gently, like a skittish horse or a malfunctioning time bomb. It whirred, sputtered, and finally spat out the paper like it was ashamed of what it contained. One page, that's all it was. Single-sided, no cover letter, no appendix. Just the clause, the title, the signature block with my name. I slid it into a folder, blue, unmarked. The kind they gave out at onboarding meetings no one remembered. I didn't staple it, didn't write a note, didn't even bend the corner. The weight of it wasn't in its mass, it was in its silence. The same way some people carry grudges, I carried that document. It sat quietly on my desk under a pile of quarterly roadmap printouts and laminated onboarding updates that nobody read. Jeremy strutted by that desk at least twice that week, arms crossed, AirPods in, sipping some beverage that cost more than my lunch. He didn't glance down. He never did. That Friday, he called me into his office, said he wanted to talk exit optics. Virginia, he said, like he was offering me a role in a community theater production. We want to give you a moment at the quarterly all hands. 11 years, after all, you've been a pillar. A quiet pillar, he added, in case I'd forgotten I wasn't one of his spotlight favorites. I smiled like I was watching a stranger step on a rake. That's very kind. He nodded, clearly proud of himself for being so gracious. We'll give you a plaque, maybe even a little photo collage. You'll say a few words, then I'll step in and wrap it with a big thank you from the exec team. It'll be tasteful, dignified, like a eulogy. I told him that sounded perfect, because it was. Perfect. He leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers like a Bond villain who thinks he's still 10 steps ahead. This isn't goodbye, Virginia. This is the next chapter. I nodded and thought, you won't survive the prologue, Jeremy. The rest of that day was spent in what I can only describe as an exquisite stillness. I attended meetings like I always did, answered questions, closed out a vendor migration request with time to spare. But everything in my body had gone still, not numb, not checked out, just still like the air before a thunderclap. I'd done what I needed to do. The printer had done its job, the folder was ready. I didn't practice a speech, didn't plan my outfit, didn't warn anyone, not Marissa, not Lydia, who had just resurfaced in a new startup, not even Carol in security, who used to bring me leftover deviled eggs from her church potlucks. Telling them would have diluted it. This wasn't a group project. This was solo theater, with one line and one prop. I kept the folder close, carrying it home in my tote bag next to a half-eaten granola bar and an expired bottle of eye drops. That folder went with me everywhere: grocery store, dry cleaner, dentist. Not because I thought someone would steal it, but because it was a piece of me now. My insurance. My quiet vengeance. Over the weekend, Jeremy emailed me a slide template titled Farewell Highlights Boone. It had 3 bullet points filled in already. None of them were true. Spearheaded initial remote work transition. Helped launch 2 major product pivots. Mentor to over a dozen junior hires. I laughed so hard I nearly forwarded it to legal. The only thing I spearheaded was the server migration that saved the company from a data breach in 2019. A fact he'd wiped from history the moment he started calling himself a cybersecurity-aware leader. I didn't correct the slide. Let him have his fiction. It would make the punchline hit harder. The night before the quarterly all-hands, I ironed my simplest blouse. No color pop, no jewelry, no statement. Just clean lines, neutral tones. The kind of outfit people forget 5 minutes after they see it. Except they wouldn't forget this time, because I wasn't walking on that stage to be remembered. I was walking up there to make him unforgettable. The folder sat on my kitchen counter as I packed my tote. I looked at it one last time before zipping the bag shut. No panic, No giddy thrill, no butterflies, just a calm certainty. Jeremy had planned the stage. I had planned the script. They brought out folding chairs this time. A sure sign the budget committee had started decorating their spreadsheets with blood. The main auditorium was decked out in Alaris branding, banners, stock photos of diverse teams high-fiving, and a looping playlist of aggressively upbeat instrumental music that sounded like it was composed by an algorithm on a sugar high. I sat in the second row center, the honored guest seat apparently. I'd been instructed to arrive early, smile, nod, and enjoy the celebration, as if the last 3 months of strategic erasure could be scrubbed with a clip reel and catered sandwiches. The new hires clustered near the cold brew station, all bright-eyed and badge lanyarded, while the veterans lingered at the edges like ghosts watching their own funerals. People smiled at me in that careful, distant way, like I was already on the other side of the glass. The lights dimmed. Jeremy took the stage. Loud, polished, perfectly rehearsed. He opened with a joke about surviving another quarter without a server fire. It earned a laugh from people who didn't know the only reason we hadn't had one was because I'd caught a backup error at 2:47 a.m. 3 weeks prior. Today, he said, pacing like a self-satisfied golden retriever in a headset mic, we honor not just progress but legacy. We stand on the shoulders of giants. I almost choked on my complimentary sparkling water. Some of those giants, he continued, are moving on to new adventures. And there it was, the beginning of the eulogy. Virginia Boone, he announced, extending a hand, has been with Alaris for 11 incredible years. She's seen us through growth, through change, and through the early days of, let's face it, utter chaos. Her quiet strength has kept us grounded. The word quiet rolled off his tongue like a passive insult dressed in pearls. He motioned for me to come up. I stood slowly, folder in hand. The applause was polite, light, reflexive. Kind you give a retiree in a beige movie no one really wanted to see. I walked up the steps, met him at center stage. His smile was tight, performance grade. The kind you laminate and reuse quarterly. He handed me the plaque. 11 years of dedication, it read in faux gold letters engraved over a background that looked like it had been designed by a funeral home intern. I took it, held it up, nodded graciously. Then he handed me the mic. Virginia, would you like to say a few words? I looked out at the crowd, so many half-familiar faces, so many open laptops. I'll keep it short, I said, nods of approval, that's the spirit. Don't drag it out, don't make it messy. I want to thank the people who showed up, I said. And the people who stayed late followed the checklist and fixed the broken things quietly. You know who you are, you kept the lights on. A few polite chuckles. And I want to thank Jeremy, I added, turning to him for giving me this moment. His smile twitched, something in his jaw tightened. I reached into the folder, pulled out the page, held it with 2 fingers. I was going to frame this, I said, but I think it's better if you read it first. He took it instinctively, like someone accepting a birthday card or party they didn't plan. He looked down, eyes skimming the top. He paused. His smile vanished. I leaned slightly toward his mic. Didn't take mine back. Just spoke close enough for it to catch my words. You'll want to read the signatory at the bottom, I said, out loud. He blinked, swallowed. The room was still. No music, no clapping, no corporate soundboard laughter. Just Jeremy squinting at the page like it had betrayed him personally. Then, crackling across the auditorium speakers, the live mic on the investor live stream flared up. Jeremy, the voice said, sharp and unmistakably clinical. Read the signatory at the bottom of that document, out loud. The silence was no longer polite, it was surgical. He looked up at me, then down at the page again. His mouth opened, closed, then finally, flat and barely audible. Virginia Boone, Retention Custodian. You could have heard a spreadsheet crash from 5 rooms away. He tried to hand the page back to me like it was radioactive. I didn't take it, instead. I gently placed the plaque he'd given me into his hands. Something to remember me by, I said softly. Then I stepped off the stage, one slow step at a time, while Jeremy stood frozen under the spotlight, holding both the symbol of his fake tribute and the document that detonated his quarter. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. He tried to laugh it off at first. You know the type. Those desperate chuckles executives use when their brain's buffering and the PowerPoint isn't loading fast enough. Jeremy gave one of those strained, teeth-baring laughs like this with some quirky surprise, like maybe I'd handed him a retirement poem or an inside joke from the old days. But then he saw the heading. He didn't laugh again. His eyes darted across the top of the page. Amendment to Resolution 14, Investor Continuity Oversight, Clause 8.2b. He mumbled the words like he was trying to read them through a snowstorm. His grip on the page changed. He held it tighter now, both hands, the kind of grip you get when a document suddenly feels like it might explode if you drop it. I watched the moment his face changed. That exact second when the words stopped being ink and turned into consequences. That's when the investor's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. Jeremy, it said, cross the loudspeakers, crisp as a fire alarm. Read the signatory at the bottom of that document, out loud. Not a question, a command, and a public one. A wave of tension hit the room like a reverse standing ovation. No one moved, no one breathed. Laptops paused mid-keystroke. Even the guy from marketing who once live tweeted an all hands about snack options was staring, jaw slightly open. Jeremy hesitated, could practically hear the screws turning in his head. His fingers twitched against the page. His lips moved once without sound. Then he spoke. Virginia Boone, he said, his voice was higher than usual. Tight. Retention Custodian. A full second passed, then another, still silence. Then the investor again, calm, cold, merciless. Clause 8.2b is now considered active, he said. As of 30 seconds ago, this meeting and any associated restructuring falls under formal investor review, pending immediate board examination. Another pause. For those unfamiliar with Clause 8.2b, it prevents the removal of the retention custodian without 90 days' notice and a full board vote. Neither occurred. Therefore, the clause is now binding. Jeremy opened his mouth, but nothing came out. It was like watching a man realize he'd driven his Tesla into a lake while bragging about autopilot. He looked out at the audience, searching for support, a lifeline, anything, but all he found was frozen smiles. The kind people wear when they're watching someone else get tased. Shock mixed with a little morbid curiosity. He turned to me, but I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I just stood there, still, calm. There was nothing to explain. Behind me, someone whispered, "Oh my God." From the far right corner, the head of legal stood slowly, phone in hand, already texting someone. A few rows back. One of our investors leaned toward her assistant and muttered something I couldn't hear, but I saw her expression. The same look you give when a painting you thought was decorative turns out to be a bomb schematic. Jeremy tried to step forward, then stopped. Because what was he going to say? That he didn't read the clause? That he'd removed the one person whose signature could freeze every cent of pending capital? That he'd staged a photo op firing of the one person who'd anticipated the playbook 6 months in advance? I turned and walked off the stage while he stood there, still holding both the plaque and the page like he didn't know which one might bite him first. Someone in the back began closing their laptop. Slowly, deliberately, like they already knew this meeting was no longer on schedule. As I walked down the steps, I didn't hear applause. I didn't hear whispers. I heard silence. And in that silence, I felt something strange. Not vindication, not revenge, control. The kind they thought I'd never have. The kind they'd never see coming again. Clause 8.2b was activated, the investor's voice repeated, this time lower, colder, with that clinical finality you only hear in SEC depositions and military funerals. That removal was unauthorized. Compliance breach is now in effect. Will proceed accordingly. And just like that, every ounce of Jeremy's body language collapsed inward, like a balloon that realized it wasn't filled with helium but hubris. He stopped blinking. His smile, once too wide and glossy, flattened into something limp and involuntary. You could see it, he was trying to calculate something to fix it, to reverse it. But this wasn't a whiteboard problem. This was a legal landmine that detonated in real time. And it was live. The investor wasn't done. Effective immediately, the voice continued. The next funding tranche is frozen pending formal review. Audit committee is being looped in. Notification has been sent to capital partners and external regulatory counsel. Jeremy, please remain available for a closed-door session with board legal by end of day. The audience, to their credit, didn't gasp. They just froze, every muscle, every breath, every planned lunch meeting turned to ice. Somewhere, a phone buzzed with the violence of a death sentence. Probably someone on the investor team getting the first round of "Are we exposed?" emails. Jeremy turned to the wings of the stage like someone expecting a fire alarm reset switch. He scanned for help, legal, HR, the EA with the iPad, anyone. But no one moved. No one could. When you're the golden boy who flew into a clause he never read, no one wants to stand too close. And me. I stepped off the stage like it was just another Wednesday. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I didn't strut. I didn't bow. I just walked. Each step was a thread unspooling from the web he'd tried to hang me in. Each click of my low heels on that polished floor echoed louder than his entire speech. People parted as I moved down the center aisle, colleagues, interns, department heads. Some looked down. Others watched me like I'd just flipped a table in a poker game they didn't know they were sitting at. Marissa from finance opened her mouth to say something. Maybe what was that? Or did you just? But she stopped herself. She knew. I saw it in her face, that flicker of comprehension, that beautiful, dawning realization that the quietest person in the building just froze the company's artery mid-beat. Backstage, someone had cut the music. Even the intern on AV looked like he'd aged 5 years. Jeremy remained on stage, still clutching the plaque like it might magically morph into a time machine. But that plaque was his tombstone. By the time I reached the exit, the head of risk was already pulling someone aside. 2 others from legal had grouped together like nuns praying over a car crash. It had begun, the internal unraveling, the desperate claw for damage control. I'd spent hours trying to figure out how it happened, why it happened, how one document slipped past Jeremy's performance-bladed radar. They wouldn't find the answer on a spreadsheet. They'd find it in the archive room, buried in dry, dust-colored paperwork. One page, one clause, one name, mine, no fury, no screaming, no vengeance manifesto posted on Slack. Just a live clause and perfect timing. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to raise the stakes. By 3:17 p.m., Jeremy's name was missing from the internal Slack directory. No announcement, no press release, just gone, like he'd never existed outside of his buzzwords and badge swipe history. The man who'd introduced culture sprints and impact zones was now an IT flag marked disabled account access suspended. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. But not because anyone leaked it. Laris didn't need leaks. It ran on whispers. The intern who ran the metrics dashboard noticed his admin rights vanished mid-refresh. Someone in legal asked aloud if she should still CC him on the quarterly compliance roll-up. By 4 o'clock, half the company had already changed their meeting invites from Cavanaugh approval required to TBD. The board scrambled. You could feel it, the heat rising through layers of silence. Private huddles in conference rooms with no windows. Legal pads appearing like holy relics. Assistants being asked to print everything, a phrase that always signals a meltdown, is in progress. Jeremy, I later heard, didn't even make it home before being intercepted by external counsel. He was placed on administrative leave pending review, which is corporate speak for we're either buying your silence or building your gallows, TBD. That same afternoon, someone from HR, new girl, fresh blowout, probably hadn't even updated her LinkedIn job title yet, sent me an email. Subject: post-departure consulting opportunity message. Hi Virginia, the executive team would love to offer you a short-term consulting role to help ease the transition and maintain continuity across core operational functions. Please let us know your availability for a quick call. I read it twice. Wanted me to ease the transition. The transition they tried to engineer without me. I didn't reply right away. I made tea, cleaned out my inbox, filed the last few reimbursement forms because I believe in leaving things cleaner than you found them. And then I wrote back, thank you for the offer. I respectfully decline. Clause 8.2b was my transition plan. No sign-off, no best, Virginia, just that. A few hours later, a second email came through, this time from the HR director herself, someone who hadn't made eye contact with me since the day Jeremy arrived. Subject: exit interview request. She framed it as an opportunity to share feedback, to close the loop with dignity, and to help Alaris grow. There was a link to a scheduling app and a smiley face emoji. I stared at it like it was written in crayon. I replied, Clause 8.2b was my exit interview. No smiley face, no link, no damn dignity carousel. It was quiet after that. No more emails, no follow-up calls, just a void, which suited me fine. I'd already given them the most valuable thing I had, time. They'd converted it into ignorance, arrogance, and a glossy plaque with my name spelled wrong. I had nothing left to offer, except maybe an example. By Friday, rumors started circulating about an emergency board session to evaluate internal compliance breakdowns. Jeremy's name was being whispered in legal circles like a ghost story. Did you hear about the guy who didn't read his own investor clauses? One associate from our VC arm allegedly called him a cautionary tale in loafers. As for me, I went home. Opened a bottle of mid-shelf red I'd been saving for no occasion in particular. Watched the rain roll down my window and thought, so this is what it feels like to leave on your own terms. Not with applause, not with handshakes or hashtags, but with stillness and power, and no unfinished business. The video leaked on a Wednesday, not through some dramatic whistleblower or late-night journalist drop. No, it showed up in a company-wide WhatsApp thread sandwiched between a link to microwave-safe salad containers and a photo of someone's cat trapped in a shredder box. It was a recording from the internal investor Q&A, a meeting most staff weren't invited to, but apparently someone forgot to disable screen capture. You could tell from the angle that it was filmed on a laptop, slightly tilted with poor lighting. But the sound, crystal clear. The investor sat at the head of a long, dark wood table. No blazer, no smile, just the kind of face that's seen too many zeros to be impressed by much of anything. He looked straight into the camera. No drama, just bone-dry sincerity. When someone signs a document, he said slowly, read who signed it, that was it. 9 words. But it cracked through the company like a thunderclap, because everyone knew what it meant. It meant Jeremy was no longer a cautionary tale in motion, he was the case study. It meant the board had officially, publicly, acknowledged that the downfall wasn't a systems error. It was a human one. His name had already vanished from the website by then. Where Chief Operating Officer used to be listed in crisp blue Helvetica, it was now just a rotating banner for interim leadership team. The SEO tag still pulled up his name for a day or two, but the cached pages were dying like unplugged machines. And that plaque? Last I heard, it was found discarded behind the event podium, wedged between a rolled-up investor banner and a half-empty box of branded pens. Jeremy never said a word. No public statement. No farewell post. He ghosted the world like he thought silence might preserve the last ounce of dignity he didn't earn. It didn't. 2 days later, I got a text from legal. Unknown number, but I knew the writing style. It was from one of the mid-levels in compliance who used to triple-check everything I filed. Your clause held. It was airtight. That was it. No emojis, no fluff. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. I know I drafted it, No gloating, no celebration. Just the truth, because here's what no one tells you about revenge. The best kind doesn't leave burn marks, it leaves paper trails. Mine wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive. I didn't storm out with a box or a speech. I didn't cry, scream, or beg. I signed one document. I waited. And I handed it to a man who thought he was giving me closure when really he was handing me the detonator. He expected gratitude. He expected tears. I gave him a trigger. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.